There are many parts to what we call the foreclosure process. We have a homeowner that has missed a payment, missed another payment. Of course, they're getting letters, they're getting calls from the bank. Hey, where's your payment? For whatever reason that they're not sending payments, either lost a job, don't have the money, whatever it may be, the bank still wants their money. Usually about 90 days is when they would start what we call the foreclosure process. And there are many pieces involved here. And I want to share with you what that process is. This is what I call the foreclosure clock. And we use it in many marketing materials. It helps people, especially property owners, understand what is that process? When can we help? When can't we help? What's that process like? I think when people are more educated on the subject, they're more likely to take action instead of being scared. It feels like a burden. It feels like, nobody goes out, yells out the front door, hey, you just want to let everybody know I'm behind on payments. They're getting ready to foreclose. Here's the other thing to it. If somebody falls behind on payments, like you can't look that up and say, who helps? You got a leaky faucet, you call a plumber. Who do you call when you're behind on payment? This whole foreclosure process starts, and that's us. That's what a real estate investor can do. Obviously have the knowledge to do it. When we look at the 1 o'clock, this is generally after 90 days of payments being missed. They haven't got a response from the owner. They're not doing anything. They haven't worked out a plan. They have to start the foreclosure process. Banks are not in the business to foreclose. They cannot have liabilities because that's what the property is to them, as a liability. I always looked at an asset puts money in your pocket and a liability takes money out of your pocket. Banks have to be what we call liquid. And that is, they make money on loaning people money. They don't make money on taking back liabilities. Now, eventually the bank will sell it off. Who knows? Most of the time it could be at a loss. It's not in their financial interest to actually take the property back. But if you keep failing to make payments, they have to. That's the process. That's what we call the entire foreclosure process. What I want to do is actually break down the pieces of that. Homeowner fails to make payments. The bank now files suit against the owner. This is what we call the pre-foreclosure process. So the bank we have to start this. They have the attorneys drop the paperwork. That paperwork then gets filed at the county. And guess what? It becomes public notice. We need that information in order to help this person. At the same time, invest into a property that we can actually get a return from. To me, it's probably one of the only win-win businesses. You think about if somebody goes through foreclosure, you hear the big bullet points, such as, obviously, you're going to lose the home. Number two, it's going to be on your credit report 7 to 10 years. But there's a lot of little things that people don't think about, such as if you have a foreclosure on your credit report, it's even hard to get credit cards, hard to apply for a car loan. And here's the one that really nobody thinks about. It would be very difficult for you to pass a rental agreement. You think about, if I were a landlord, why would I rent a property to somebody that didn't even make payments on their own home? You have to think about that, because those are the things that we can stop. That's worth more than making 10 grand on a property to them. Now, I'm all for if the homeowner can make a little bit of money and we can structure the deal, absolutely. Everything comes down to numbers. But there are a lot of cases where we can't do that. But the benefits of them doing that far exceed any kind of financial gain. But also keep in mind, a lot of people that still live in the house can't afford to move. They can't afford to get a U-Haul. They can't afford to put a deposit down. And that's where I'm more open to giving what we call move-in money to help assist them out of the property and start over again. When we get to that pre-foreclosure state, the bank's moving forward unless the homeowner agrees to somehow restructure the loan. They could, maybe the bank says, hey, make half the payments for 6 months. But if they don't, this process is going to continue. Now, usually, once the paperwork is filed at the county to say, hey, you're in pre-foreclosure, an auction date is set. Doesn't happen all the time, though, which can make it tricky, especially for us as investors, not knowing when that auction date is going to be. Sometimes the county will show what the actual judgment amount is, which is generally the debt plus fees, attorney fees, etc. Some counties don't show that. So we really don't know all the numbers but I don't really need to know too many numbers at this point. Now, I don't understand or know the condition of the property, and I won't know that until I actually visit the property. But I won't be able to visit the property unless I can speak to the owner and be invited to go look at the property. This is where we need to market people. As soon as that notice from the courthouse, boom, we need to be marketing them. Remember, real estate investing is not about doing hundreds of properties. It's one at a time, because one turns into two, two turns into 10. 10 turns into 100. Here's the other good news about real estate investing. Hello, wake up. You don't have to do 100 deals to actually make a living. And that's the beauty of real estate investing. When the dollars increase there, obviously there creates opportunities for investors to, number one, solve the problem, help the homeowner, obviously by saving their credit, helping them move. If there is a way for them to make some extra money, meaning that the numbers work out, absolutely. It's going to help everyone. But if this clock gets all the way down to the auction date, guess what? We can't help them. See, it's about them first because it's out of our control at that point. Once a property goes to auction, usually a starting minimum bid is pretty much the debt on the property. It could be more depending on the value of it. People bid on that or they don't bid on that. If nobody outbids the bank, guess who wins the auction? The bank. They then take that property back, and that's what we call bank owned or REO, real estate owned. That's the foreclosure process in a nutshell. People that ask, what happens when the bank takes the property back? Well, number one, and this does not happen immediately, by the way. This could be months later, could be a year down the road. They'll have a realtor come in that usually specializes with that bank working bank-owned properties. They will go and get a value of that property and they'll put it on the market and they'll try to sell it. But I want you to think about this. If the bank takes ownership of the property at the auction, who pays the taxes? Who pays the insurance? Are the utilities shut off? Who pays that? Was there previous debt on the utilities? What about any kind of HOA dues that may have been due? Who pays that? Guess what? The new owner. That's the bank. See, the bank is losing money in this case, unless there's a ton of equity and they could sell it for more. But this could be 6 months to a year later. This is not a profitable thing for the bank. Banks are not in a position to hire departments of people just to handle this. Although they have after the, 2006, 7, 8, especially 8 timeframe, that's what everybody was doing, just walking away from the home. We have to help people prior to the auction date. The only way to do that is to market them. A lot of people say, hey, can't you pick up the phone and call? You can. I've tried many, many times. But guess what? People are screening their calls because everybody on the planet's calling. Hey, you owe me money. And usually, if you're not making your house payment, you may not be making your car payment. You may not be making your credit card payment. The downside is everybody reacts differently, and you never know what you're walking into. I have seen people that literally say, I pull up to the property. I remember this property in Las Vegas, pulled up to the property. The owner was walking out of the house. Beautiful home, by the way. He was carrying the last box out of the house. He said, hey, are you Chris? I said, I am. He looked at me and he said, good luck. Obviously I've got his contact information to structure a deal, but he didn't care. He let the burden go. I'm done. I'm done worrying. I'm done stressing. I don't really care what happens to me at this. Some people, they care. They really do care about their credit. But after over months and months, they're just like, there's nothing I can do. You know why? Because it goes back to the leaky faucet where normally you just go to Google and you find a plumber. A lot of people think, oh, I'll call an attorney because, well, guess what? You're going to file for bankruptcy through an attorney. Filing bankruptcy or going through foreclosure is not the solution. Now, I do have to say, if you don't have equity in the property, unfortunately, we just can't help. We don't run a nonprofit organization. It is a business, but a business can also make it mutual beneficial for both parties. That's the way I like to structure the deals. Sometimes the property's vacant where the homeowner, they've already left. Now, that obviously makes it a little bit easier because we go look at the property. We can estimate repair costs. We can figure out what are we going to do with this property. And then we lead into exit strategy. 99.9% of the time, I want you to fix it up and sell it. Time is of the essence when we work with these people. Don't be delaying. Look, we have to get this done. If I don't make up these back payments, guess what? I can't help you. You will lose everything. And if it goes to auction, once it's sold, they're going to have a sheriff come over and kick you out of the house and all of your things, and you can't do anything about it. Don't wait. I'm here to look, I'm here to help. Yes, I'm investing. I need to make some money off this, but it doesn't mean that we all can't benefit from this. I know how to solve this problem. And look, a lot of people think that they can stay in the house, but I can't invest into the property and keep you there because think about it. And I can't say this to the owner. I can't keep you in the house because if you didn't pay the bank, your own bank, why in the world would you ever pay me? But that's the reality of it. That's why we're not investing in them. We're not investing in a human being. We're investing into the property. In
The
order for this
property.
to work right, we need to have you out of the house. Now, I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to help you get out of the house. I would tell you, one of my students did a pre-foreclosure in Colorado Springs to be exact. I just so happened to do infield training with her at this exact time. She's got all of her kids already they went to college, had good jobs, and she was so embarrassed to tell her kids and ask for help. And we actually told her, you need to do this. Like you need to call your kids and she would not do it. Because we're not just going to kick. If there's a way to avoid this, we're going to do that. Just kept refusing. And she goes, you doing this is helping me. And she was going to move in with one of her best friends. And she was happy about that. So what we did is my student, her husband, and his brother rented a U-Haul and they came and packed the entire house for her. And I remember that she was just overwhelmed with what they did to help her on
That's good.
that deal. That's where when you meet people like that and you see what they've done, I've had people cry in front of me, and it really does make an impact, huge impact on people. And it may only be one or two people at a time, but that's all it takes.